In 1944, on the 50th day of a war patrol 60 feet beneath the Pacific, a sailor strikes a match, and it will not light. Not because it's wet, because there is no longer enough oxygen in the air around him to sustain an open flame, and he is still breathing that same air right now. People imagine a clean, quiet, blue-lit submarine you've seen in a movie. That's not where we're going. We're going aboard a World War II fleet boat, a Balao-class diesel submarine, and this is exactly what 60 days sealed inside one did to the human body, hour by hour, system by system, the way a flight surgeon would debrief a crew that came back changed. Because they always came back changed. The Navy just didn't put that part in the recruiting posters. And by the time we're done, you're going to understand something the recruiting posters got exactly backwards. The submarine was never the weapon. The men were. The boat was just the thing they had to survive in order to use it. Here's the machine. 311 feet of welded steel, roughly 27 feet at its widest, displacing about 1,500 tons on the surface. Inside that hull, you did not have a ship. You had a steel pipe, packed bow to stern with 4 diesel engines, 2 banks of massive electric batteries, 10 torpedo tubes, thousands of gallons of fuel, tons of food, and between 70 and 80 men. Every one of those men had to eat, sleep, work, breathe, and stay sane inside a pressure vessel with less usable living space than a single-story house for 2 months, without stepping outside, without seeing the sun on most days, and without any real way to get off. Walk it end to end, and you pass through a series of watertight compartments, each one a different world. The forward torpedo room, stacked with weapons and sleeping men. The officers' quarters, barely bigger than a closet. The control room, dense with wheels and gauges and the periscopes. The mess and galley the size of a home kitchen feeding 80. The engine rooms that roar. The maneuvering room where the boat's electrical nervous system lived. And the after torpedo room where the ride was roughest. That's your universe. All of it. For 60 days. And that's the first thing civilians never understand about a submarine war patrol. On a surface ship, you're miserable, but you're in the world. There's a horizon, there's weather, there's a deck to walk. On a fleet boat, the world ends at the hull. The steel around you is the entire universe for the length of the patrol, and that universe is trying in about 9 different ways to slowly break you. Let's debrief all 9. Act 1. The box itself and why it was designed to be survivable, not comfortable. A fleet boat had 2 ways to exist. On the surface, at night, it ran on its diesels. 4 big engines gulping air down through the hull, charging the batteries, pushing the boat at maybe 20 knots, and critically, ventilating the interior with fresh sea air. That was the good time. That was when the boat breathed. Submerged during daylight or during an attack, everything changed. The diesels can't run underwater. They'd suffocate because a diesel eats oxygen just like you do. So the boat went silent and switched to battery power, running off those 2 enormous banks of lead-acid cells. And from that moment, the crew was living inside a sealed can. No fresh air coming in, no exhaust going out. Just 70-odd men and whatever atmosphere was already trapped inside the pressure hull. And here's the number that reframes the whole video. A submerged fleet boat could typically stay down for around 12 hours in normal operations and could be forced to stay down far longer, sometimes a full day or more if enemy ships were hunting on the surface. The entire biological ordeal we're about to walk through is what happens to a human body inside a sealed steel container over that time, repeated day after day for 60 days. The submarine wasn't built to keep you comfortable. It was built to keep you barely, precisely alive, and to let you kill. Comfort was never on the blueprint. Every cubic inch that could have been a wider bunk or second head was instead a torpedo, a shell of battery, a barrel of fuel, a case of food. The machine was optimized for one thing: to deliver 70 men and 24 torpedoes to a firing position on the far side of an ocean and bring most of them home. You were cargo the boat kept alive so the cargo could pull the trigger. Now, the counterintuitive part, and this is straight out of the Hidden Reason playbook. Submariners got the best food in the entire United States Navy. Genuinely, steak, fresh eggs, real coffee, and famously, an ice cream machine on many boats. Why would the most cramped, most dangerous, most physically punishing branch of the Navy get the best chow? Because the food was the counterweight. The submarine service had the highest casualty rate of any American service arm in the war. Roughly 1 in 5 submariners who went out on patrol did not come back. 52 boats lost. More than 3,000 men still on what submariners call eternal patrol. The Navy couldn't give these men space or sunlight or safety, so it gave them the one comfort it could stuff into a steel tube: calories and quality. The good food wasn't generosity. It was the ration that made the rest of the sentence bearable. Hold on to that idea. Comfort as compensation for risk, because it comes back at the very end, and it explains something the Navy did after every patrol that almost no one talks about. And one more thing about who was even in the boat. You did not get sent to submarines. You volunteered, and then you were screened hard. Psychological interviews, claustrophobia tests, escape tank training in a 100-foot column of water, and a standing rule that any man on the crew could wash out any volunteer he didn't trust at his back, because on a fleet boat, one panicking man could kill all 80. So everyone we're about to follow into that hull was pre-selected to take a load that would break a normal person. Keep that in mind as it gets worse. These weren't average men having an average bad time. These were hand-picked men being pushed to the edge of what selection could prepare them for. Act 2, the 60-day grind and what each system does to the body. Buckle in. This is the debrief itself. Start with heat, because heat is the one that hits first and never lets go. A fleet boat operated mostly in the Pacific in warm and tropical water. On the surface, that's fine. Submerged, the ocean around the hull was often warm, meaning the boat had almost no way to dump the heat that 70 men and a stack of machinery generated. Think about what's making heat in there. 4 diesels that were just running, 2 banks of batteries under load, electric motors, cooking, refrigeration compressors, and 80 warm human bodies, all sealed inside a metal tube that the sea refuses to cool. The engine rooms could reach 100 degrees, 120 in the worst of it, with humidity effectively at 100%. Condensation ran down the inside of the hull. Men called it the boat sweating, and it wasn't a figure of speech. The steel above your bunk would literally drip on you while you slept, a warm, oily, metallic rain that never stopped. Within days, nearly every man developed prickly heat, a rash of raw, inflamed skin across the back, the groin, anywhere fabric touched flesh and never dried. Men powdered themselves, stripped to shorts and sandals, stood watch half naked in the engine spaces, and it didn't matter. There was no curing it on patrol. You just lived inside your own body's failing thermostat for 2 months in a heat rash that covered you from your collar to your knees. Now stack water rationing on top of the heat, because this is where it gets brutal. A submarine made its own fresh water using evaporators, stills that boiled seawater and condensed the steam. But that fresh water had a priority list, and the men were not at the top of it. First priority was the batteries, which needed distilled water to keep from destroying themselves. And if the batteries died, the boat died, so the batteries always won. Second was cooking and drinking. Dead last, if there was anything left, was washing. So on a long patrol, showers effectively stopped. You might get one in weeks. The unwritten rule was simple and grim. You drink your water, you do not waste it on your skin. Now put it together. 70 men, 110-degree sweatbox, prickly heat weeping under their clothes, no showers for weeks. The same coveralls worn until they could nearly stand up on their own. The smell has a name among submariners, the sea funk, sometimes just the smell. A thick compound of diesel, sweat, cooking grease, battery gas, mildew, and unwashed men. And veterans said you stop noticing your own after about a week, which tells you everything about how completely the human nose surrenders. When a boat came into port and the hatch opened, dock workers a deck away could smell the patrol before a single man climbed out. Let's talk about the head, the toilet, because this is the detail that makes people gasp, and it's real. On a submerged submarine, the toilet can't just flush out into the ocean. The sea outside is at higher pressure than the air inside the boat, so the ocean wants to come in, not let your waste out. To use it, you had to operate a specific sequence of valves and a pressurized tank to physically blow the waste out of the hull against the pressure of the sea. There was a printed instruction card, there was training, there was, on some boats, a qualified man you were supposed to check with. Get that sequence wrong valve, wrong order, wrong pressure, and the sea pressure would slam everything in that bowl straight back up and out, all over you and the compartment, under pressure. Submariners had a phrase for it. They called it getting your own back. Now imagine doing that in the dark, on red light, at depth, while the boat is rigged for silent running and you cannot make a sound. You cannot even flush because the noise could give the boat's position to a destroyer overhead. So there were stretches where the head simply couldn't be blown for hours, and it sat there, filling in a sealed 100-degree compartment with the men. That was a normal Tuesday. Now food again, but the truth of it over time. Yes, it started as the best in the Navy, but a fleet boat only had so much refrigeration and so much dry storage and no resupply for 60 days. So the food decayed on a schedule. Fresh fruit and vegetables and eggs, gone in the first week, maybe 2. Fresh meat from the reefer boxes, a few weeks. And then, for the long back half of the patrol, you were living out of cans. Endless canned meat, beans, powdered eggs, powdered milk, and the wartime staple everyone remembers, Spam, in quantities that turned men off it for the rest of their lives. Cooks became magicians of the skies, renaming the same canned pork 6 different ways to keep men eating it. Some boats stacked so many crates of canned goods when they left port that the crew literally walked on catwalks of food stacked on the deck plates, ducking under pipes until they ate their way down to the floor. You could measure the patrol by how far the food had sunk beneath your feet. Week 1, you're stooped over walking on cans. Week 8, you're standing on steel again, and the standing on steel meant the pantry was nearly empty and the patrol was nearly done, which is the only clock down there that ever brought good news. And now the big one, air. This is the system that quietly runs down toward that match that won't light. When the boat was sealed and submerged, 2 things happened to the atmosphere with every hour that passed. Oxygen went down because 70 men were burning it with every breath, and carbon dioxide went up because those same 70 men were exhaling it, and there was nowhere for it to go. To fight the CO2, boats spread a chemical absorbent, soda lime or lithium hydroxide, in trays and across surfaces to soak the carbon dioxide out of the air. To fight the oxygen loss, they bled O2 from high-pressure bottles into the boat. But this was crude and slow, and on a long submerged day, it lost the race. The air got thick, men got headaches, got groggy, got short of breath doing nothing, got a kind of dull stupidity where simple arithmetic took twice as long and orders had to be repeated. Officers learned to watch their own crews for it. A man moving slow, a man breathing hard, sitting still, a man who couldn't follow a 2-step instruction, because those were the early signs that the air was going. And the crew's oldest, simplest test for how bad it had gotten was that match, because a candle or a match starved of oxygen dies before a man does. When it wouldn't light, you weren't running an experiment. You were being told by fire itself that the air keeping you conscious was almost spent and that you needed to surface and breathe or start making mistakes that kill. Fire needs about 16% oxygen to burn. A human can stay conscious lower than that. So the flame going out was the boat's warning shot, the last quiet signal before the men themselves started to fail. So think about what that does to a body over 60 days. It's not one bad night. It's a daily cycle. Every submerged day, the atmosphere degrades. Every surface night, the diesels flush it clean, and your body rides that oxygen roller coaster down and up, dozens of times across the patrol. Chronic mild hypoxia, chronic CO2 exposure, chronic sleep debt layered on top. Your heart working harder to move thinner air, your judgment quietly shaved down day after day, and men who are being asked to aim torpedoes and manage a nuclear-grade set of valves and stay calm under depth charges. This is the biology nobody put in the war movies, and it's running the entire time underneath everything else we're describing. And underneath even that ran two more insults the men rarely mentioned because they simply never stopped. First, noise. The boat was never silent to the body, even when it was rigged silent to the enemy. The whine of the electric motors, the hum of the ventilation, the gurgle of trim and drain lines, the slow groan of the hull working against the pressure, and on the surface, the full 4-diesel roar coming up through steel the men were effectively bolted to. They learned to sleep through all of it, and still came home with their hearing measurably dulled, some of them for good. And second, stillness. There was nowhere to walk, nothing to lift, no room to so much as stretch out. So across 60 days, the body simply deconditioned. Muscles softened. Legs forgot the plain work of standing on solid ground. Men who climbed down the hatch, lean and fit, climbed back out of it 2 months later, pale, thinned, and unsteady, weaving on a pier that would not stop feeling like it was moving beneath them for days. The boat didn't only wear the mind down, it quietly unbuilt the body too, one motionless day at a time. Which brings us to sleep, and the practice that sounds made up but wasn't, hot racking. There were more men on the boat than there were bunks, because bunks take space, and space was the one thing a submarine did not have. So the crew shared beds on rotation. 3 men, 2 bunks. You'd finish a watch, crawl into a rack still warm and damp from the body of the man who just left it to take your place, sleep your few hours, and hand it off still warm to the next man. The bunks themselves were tucked wherever they'd fit, including in the torpedo rooms, where men slept inches from live torpedoes, on shelves slided between the weapons, so that the last thing you saw before you closed your eyes was the warhead of a Mark 14, a 4 arms length from your face. You slept in the heat, in the wet, in the smell, in the noise, in air that was slowly going bad, in a bed that was never yours and never cold. And that was the good sleep. That was the restful version. The bad sleep is what happened when the enemy showed up. And every bit of that endurance existed to serve 90 seconds of work. The attack. This is what the whole ordeal was for. A target, a freighter, a tanker, a troop transport would appear and the boat would begin the approach. The captain at the periscope calling bearings and ranges in a low, flat voice. The tracking party in the control room turning those numbers into a firing solution on a mechanical computer the size of a refrigerator. The whole crew going from exhausted stupor to absolute silence and focus in the space of a single breath. The periscope came up for only seconds at a time. Any longer, and a lookout on the target might spot the feather of wake it cut, and the hunter became the hunted. down, up again, angles and speed and range. The target's zigzag pattern read and predicted like a chess move 3 turns ahead. And then, fire 1, fire 2. The boat lurching with each shot as 1.5 tons of torpedo left the tube and the trim party fought to keep the bow from breaching the surface. Then the longest wait in the world, 40, 60, 90 seconds of the torpedoes running while the sound man called the screws and every man aboard counted in his head. And then, if the solution was good, a distant, hull-shaking thud that everyone felt in their chests, and a cheer bitten down to nothing, because the escorts were already turning, and the price for those 90 seconds was about to come due. That was the job. Everything else, the heat, the funk, the bad air, the fear, was just the cost of admission to that firing point. Because here's the terror that sat under all of it, the depth charge. When an enemy escort found the boat, it dropped canisters of explosive set to detonate at your depth, and the crew went to silent running, engines down, non-essential machinery off, no talking, no movement. Everyone frozen in a 110-degree steel tube, listening to the pings of enemy sonar sweeping the hull, hunting for the echo that meant they'd found you. First, you'd hear the propellers of the ship passing overhead, a rushing, grinding beat that grew and grew. Then the splashes, then the arming clicks, if you were close enough, and then the explosions. Close ones would slam the entire boat sideways, shatter light bulbs in a spray of glass, crack gauge glass, knock cork insulation off the hull, spring leaks in the sea fittings that sent seawater misting into the compartment and popped the deck plates up under your feet. And you did nothing. You couldn't shoot back. You couldn't run at more than a crawl without the noise giving you away. Men described lying in a bunk in total darkness, unable to move or speak, feeling the steel hull flex around them, doing the only thing left to do, counting the explosions and the seconds between, and waiting to find out if the next one had their number. Some attacks lasted minutes, some lasted hours, some lasted most of a day, the destroyers circling and dropping, while the boat sat deep and silent and hot, and slowly ran out of air. You do not sleep normally again for a while after that. Some men never quite did. And laced through all of it were the 2 deaths that didn't wait 60 days. The 2 that could take the whole boat in seconds. Fire in a sealed steel tube full of diesel, hydraulic oil, high-pressure oxygen, and the hydrogen gas that vents off lead-acid batteries as they charge. A spark in the wrong compartment, and the fire would begin eating the very air the crew needed to fight it, filling the boat with smoke that had nowhere to go, and flooding. A failed valve, a sprung fitting, a hole weld opened by a close depth charge, the sea coming in under crushing pressure, a stream so hard at depth it could cut a man's hand off, into a compartment that then had to be sealed off to save the rest of the boat, sometimes with men still inside it, hammering on the door they knew could not be opened. Every submariner knew both. Every submariner had drilled both until the actions were a reflex. And every submariner understood the arithmetic that made those drills matter. On a fleet boat, there was no lifeboat, no swim to the surface from 400 feet down. The boat either held or it became the coffin it had always been shaped like. Everything we've just walked through, the heat, the water, the air, the fear, the men survived it because they were selected and conditioned to, long before the hatch ever closed. The submarine service screened hard and trained harder because the boat had zero tolerance for a body or mind that couldn't take the load. It is worth sitting with that. The ordeal was so predictable, so certain, that the entire pipeline into these boats existed to find the specific kind of man who could absorb it and keep working. The selection wasn't a formality. It was the first line of the boat's defense. Act 3. The mind at day 50, because the body was never the hardest part. Here's what 60 days of that cycle does to a human brain. Strip away the sun first. Submerged by day, surfaced by night, the crew lived inverted. And inside the hull, it was always the same dim, artificial light, switched to red before surfacing to protect the lookout's night vision. Your body's clock, the circadian rhythm that runs on sunrise and sunset, had nothing to lock onto. Day and night dissolved into an endless gray sameness of watches, 4 hours on, 8 off, around and around, with no morning to reset you. Men lost track of what day it was. Some lost track of how long they'd been down and had to ask. The only marker of time that stayed honest was the food sinking beneath your feet and the tally of the days chalked somewhere in the control room. And even those, you had to go and check because your body had stopped keeping the count on its own. Then add the confinement itself. There is nowhere to go on a submarine. You cannot take a walk. You cannot be alone. There is no door on this entire vessel you can close behind you and simply be by yourself for 10 minutes. Even the captain, even the officers, lives within arm's reach of the crew. You are pressed against the same 70 faces, the same smells, the same jokes gone stale on day 9 and told again on day 40. The same snoring man in the next rack for 2 months with no exit and no privacy of any kind. Psychologists have a clean phrase for the mix of monotony, confinement, and low-grade constant threat that the crews lived inside. The submariners had a blunter one. They said the sea and the boat and the waiting would get inside a man's head, and on nearly every long patrol, there'd be someone who started to crack under it, who got quiet and strange, or too loud, or stopped eating, or fixed on some small thing and couldn't let it go, and who had to be quietly watched, given easy jobs, kept away from the sharp end of the boat, talked down in the dark, and carried by the crew until they got home. That's what stay sane actually means down here. Sanity was a group project. No single man kept his own alone. The crew held each other's minds the way they held the hull, with constant, unglamorous, shared attention, because the alternative was that the whole boat came apart. And through all of it, the strangest psychological weight of a submarine war patrol, the long, empty boredom, punctuated by minutes of absolute terror. 95% of a patrol was tedium, watches, maintenance, canned beans, the drip of the sweating hull, the same faces, the same gray light. And then, in 90 seconds, it would flip. Smoke on the horizon, a convoy, a firing solution called down from the bridge, torpedoes away, the whole boat lurching as tons of weapon left the tubes and the trim had to be caught instantly so the bow didn't broach. And then the escort turning to hunt you, and suddenly every one of those exhausted, half-starved, oxygen-starved, half-asleep men had to be sharp enough to fight for their lives in seconds from a dead stop. Then, if they survived it, back to the tedium. The nervous system never got to fully stand down and never got to fully fire up. It just idled in a state of low dread for 60 days, spiking into raw terror without warning and dropping back into gray boredom over and over. In that specific pattern, not one acute trauma, not restful calm, but endless vigilance shot through with sudden terror, is one of the most corrosive loads you can put on a human mind. We have a modern name for what that does to people. The men who came home just called it being a little jumpy and lived with it quietly for the rest of their lives. So what came home? A submariner stepping back onto the pier after a 60-day patrol had typically lost noticeable weight. His skin was pale from no sun and often broken out from the heat and the filth. He carried a chronic sleep debt that took weeks to repay. His hearing might be dulled from the engines and the depth charges. His hands might not be quite steady. His nerves were frayed in a way that a good meal and a hot shower couldn't touch. And here, the Navy did something remarkable, and it ties right back to that idea of comfort as compensation for risk. After a war patrol, it did not simply send these men back out. It sent submarine crews to a rest camp, a requisitioned resort hotel, clean sheets, quiet, unlimited food, a beach, no watches, no bells, for roughly 2 full weeks of steak, sleep, and sunshine before it would let them go out again. Think about what that policy is admitting. The Navy of the 1940s, not exactly famous for coddling its men, looked at what a patrol did to a submarine crew and concluded, in writing, that these men needed to be medically and psychologically rebuilt before they were fit to be sent back into the tube. The patrol didn't just cost the boat fuel and torpedoes, it spent the men, and the Navy understood it needed time to buy them back. Now zoom out, because here's the reframe this whole debrief was building toward. When you picture a World War II submarine, you picture the machine, the sleek hull, the periscope, the torpedoes, the shark mouth painted on the bow. But the machine was never the weapon. The men were the weapon, and the submarine was the thing they had to survive in order to use it. Every torpedo that found a target was fired by a crew who were, at that exact moment, dehydrated, overheated, sleep-starved, breathing bad air, unwashed, riddled with heat rash, and afraid, and functioning anyway with the precision of a firing solution. That's the part that should stay with you. Not that the boat was tough. Boats are steel. Toughness is cheap and steel. That the people were tough in conditions we would today classify as a genuine medical and psychological emergency, held for 60 days at a stretch, patrol after patrol, until the war was won or the boat simply didn't come back and join the 52 that never did. The fleet boats are credited with strangling the Japanese merchant fleet and starving an island empire of the oil and steel and rice it needed to fight, a campaign that arguably shortened the war by a wide margin. And it was done by the smallest branch of the Navy, taking the heaviest losses from inside the worst working conditions the service could produce. Debrief notes. 3 things to carry out of this one. Note 1. The submarine's true enemy wasn't the destroyer overhead. It was the atmosphere inside the hull. Oxygen falling, carbon dioxide rising, heat climbing, water running short. The boat was a slow siege against the crew's own biology, and every day submerged was a countdown to a match that wouldn't light. The enemy you can see drops depth charges. The enemy that actually wears a crew down is the air they're breathing and the heat they're sitting in, hour after hour, with no way out. Note 2. Comfort and survival are not the same budget, and the men in charge knew it. The Navy gave submariners the best food in the fleet and a resort at the end, precisely because it could not give them space, air, or safety. The luxuries were a deliberate counterweight to a death rate of roughly 1 in 5, the highest of any American force in the war. When an institution starts handing out steak and beach leave to one specific group of men, look at what those men are being asked to endure. The perks are a confession. Note 3. The hardest system on any submarine was the human mind. Heat and hunger you can endure. The body is more durable than we give it credit for. It was the sunless clock, the total confinement, and the endless low dread punched through with terror that actually threatened to break men. And the crew survived it not as individuals, but as a single organism that watched each other, covered each other, and carried each other all the way home. The boat kept out the sea. The crew kept out the madness. Both hulls had to hold. And that's the debrief. That's what 60 days inside that steel tube actually did to the men who rode it. and why the ones who came back were never quite the same as the ones who left. Every part of it, the heat, the funk, the failing air, the depth charges, the sunless clock, was carried by men who were, at that same moment, still aiming torpedoes and still holding each other's minds together, all the way home. So the next time you see one of these boats behind glass in a museum, clean and quiet and cold, remember it was never the machine that was tough. It was the men sealed inside it. If this rewired how you see that machine, drop a comment with the next sealed box you want opened, because there are stranger ones than this.